the camera turns to them as well. For meetings and things, it's good though, because it shows whoever's speaking, basically. So, okay, right. So, Iris, 1 second. Would you like to read the synopsis?
Right. Okay. Moses sends 12 spies to the land of Canaan. 40 days later, they return, carrying a huge cluster of grapes, a pomegranate, and a fig, to report on a lush and bountiful land. But 10 of the spies warn that the inhabitants of the land are giants and warriors more powerful than we. Only Caleb and Joshua insist that the land can be conquered, as God has commanded. The people weep that they'd rather return to Egypt. God decrees that Israel's entry into the land shall be delayed 40 years, during which time that entire generation will die out in the desert. A group of remorseful Jews storm the mountain on the border of the land and are routed by the Amalekites and Canaanites. The laws of the Nesachim, meal, wine, and oil offerings are given, as well as a mitzvah to consecrate a portion of the dough, challah, to God when making bread. And man violates the Shabbat by gathering sticks and is put to death. God instructs to place fringes, tzitzit, on the 4 corners of our garments, so that we should remember to fulfill the mitzvot, the divine commandments.
Right, thank you. Okay, so the main feature of this, of course, is the spies and the spies' entry into the land. The spies' mission, and they come back, and for some very strange reason, they come back with this complex that we're not good enough. Now, question, does it make any sense whatsoever? What's been happening until now?
Everything was done for them.
Right, they've left Egypt. There were plagues that brought Egypt to its knees. They crossed the Red Sea. They fought and defended Amalek. They sung. Let's have a look at, well, we'll come to that in a moment. First of all, let's just see the exact quote regarding the spies report. And for those who watched my United League broadcast on Friday, this is where we got the line about the grasshoppers. Who would like to read source number 1? I can only see myself for some reason. So just
okay, Rabbi,
Just
go for it. Oh, there we
came
go.
to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large.
Right. So far, by the way, until that point, it's simply a reconnaissance report, right? An intelligence report. Now comes the spin. Yeah.
We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. We seem to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seem to them.
How do they know that? How do they know the people were so big compared to them? How near did they go?
And how did they know what those people thought of them?
We'll come to that in a minute. So, it's all a matter of perspective. My mother-in-law always tells the joke, which probably can't tell nowadays. Back in the days of the Wild West, there's a couple of cowboys riding on a stagecoach. One's riding shotgun and the other's, whatever, I don't know, driving the horses, whatever. And he says, okay, if you see any Indians, let me know. He says, okay. He says, I see an Indian. He says, how big is he? He says, he's about that big. He says, okay. A few minutes later, he says, how big is he now? He says, he's about that big. He says, okay, when he gets bigger, let me know. He says, how big is he now? He says, he's that big. He says, okay, you got to shoot him. He says, I can't shoot him. He says, why not? He says, I knew him since he was that big.
Oh.
So it's all a matter. It's all a matter of. It's actually a very it's a good parable, but I have to probably replace the cowboys and Indians these days. But anyway, it's all a matter of perspective. Now, the answer to the question, it's a bit like when someone says, "Gosh, I could have died out there. I must have looked so stupid." Did you look stupid, or is it just your perception? I always tell bar mitzvah boys, I'm no great, I don't know much about drama. I talk with great confidence to bar mitzvah boys. I always tell them that if you make a mistake and you basically carry on, most people won't even notice. I said, if I have to correct you, I'll correct you. But more often than not, you're more likely to get it right if you just relax and don't worry and just go with the flow. But often people say, oh, I made a terrible mistake. Oh, gosh, everyone must have noticed. Now they've noticed. So they are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. That's a statement of fact. We're not able to go up against the people, but they're stronger than we are. That's an opinion, right? That's an opinion. The land which we've gone to spy out is a land that devours its inhabitants. The people we saw in it are of great height. That also sounds like a bit of an opinion, at least the first part. And finally, this last line, which I've spoken about previously, and I spoke about in my US thing, I think is one of the most amazing single lines in the Torah, because in just one line, the syntax, or perhaps the sequence rather of it, it lends itself to such profound psychological insight. It's very carefully worded. We seemed, in fact, it's a great translation. This is Rabbi Sachs' translation. I'll give you the Hebrew. Vanahi ba'einenu kechagavim. That means we were. Yehiyeh, vanahi. We were ba'einenu, in our own eyes, kechagavim, like locusts. Right? We saw ourselves like locusts. Nothing to do with the people of the land. We had a low opinion of ourselves. Nothing against locusts or grasshoppers, but they're quite lowly creatures, right? We saw ourselves as just little insects to be trampled on. And then says the Torah, and so did we appear in the eyes of the people of the land. Very deliberate sequence. We saw ourselves as unworthy, and therefore that's how we appeared to them. So how do we know how they appeared to the people of the land? We don't. In fact, actually, it's complete nonsense. We'll see the people of the land were terrified of them. We see that with Rachav. We'll see that shortly. But because of their own inferiority complex, wherever that's come from, this wording is very telling. We saw ourselves as grasshoppers. Not they saw us as grasshoppers. We saw ourselves as grasshoppers. We were the, it's very, there's a certain anti-Semitic trope which nobody likes of the sniveling, well, I don't know if it's an anti-Semitic trope or if it's a Jewish trope, of the sniveling Jew who's apologizing for just existing. I saw a quote somewhere that said, I don't know if you come across the phrase walking whilst black. I think there might be a abbreviation for it. People say like, well, why did that guy get arrested by the police? Oh, his crime was walking while black. In other words, he's black and he was walking down the street. So somebody I saw posted online referring to the attack on Rabbi Goodwin that his crime was walking while Jewish. In other words, there was no crime other than existing. So when you start to apologize for your mere existence, you have such a low self-opinion. We sing ourselves like grasshoppers. We weren't worthy. We're not worthy of this land. We're not worthy of this land.
Maybe it was the fact that they've been looked after all the time they've been wandering. And if they said it was all good, they would lose some of the protection.
So that is one of the deep. So that very good. So that is definitely one of the insights that is often commented. Who were these spies? They were princes of their tribes. They weren't evil people. So what was their agenda? This is not Korach, who was, setting out to grab power, or Amalek, who's trying to kill everyone. What was their real agenda? So there are various places where the suggestion is it's like the Stockholm syndrome, right? Their real agenda was, there's like people that, will do something, when they're about to get released from prison, they'll do something deliberately to end up staying in prison. They'll assault a guard or something. Why? Because they're scared to go out into the world. Because they're scared to leave that, as Sally said, to leave that protection. So one of the more charitable views of the role of,
it's a selfish thing because they don't want the responsibility.
Right. And when they go into the land, they're going to have to start working the land, and there's going to be no quail falling out the sky anymore. They're not going to have clouds magically washing their clothes or accompanying them day and night. They're going to have to go to work. Yeah, they're going to have to, they want to do another degree. They want to be perpetual students. They don't want to go to work. The irony is that Adam and Eve already worked, and working the land through the sweat of your brow was seen as a value. But they've been in the desert all this time. So there is definitely that suggestion, yes, that the spies' agenda was not that they were trying to deliberately sabotage efforts to enter the promised land, but they actually saw entering to the promised land as a concern.
The trouble was they'd been slaves for a long time, being told what to do all the time. Then they've been in the desert where God was telling them what to do and doing things for them. And now they've got to, they're thinking that they've got to do things for themselves without somebody to tell them what is the right thing to do and what's the wrong thing to do.
Right. So let me ask you a quick historical question. Off the top of your head, and I may not even know this myself, name a couple of the most recent places that the West went to war in order to protect or implement democracy.
Iran, Afghanistan.
Well, not Iran, Iraq, yeah?
Iraq.
Wherever there's been ISIS.
Afghanistan, Libya, right? I just read somewhere that Afghanistan, there was something. How many of these places now are thriving democracies?
No different.
Right. Why not?
Either they've lacked education or they've lacked leadership, or both.
Or it's kind of what we just touched on just now. You can't just take a load of people that lived under a repressive regime and suddenly expect them to suddenly buy into your new vision. These people have been walking, not repressed, but they've been in the desert with everything on a plate. You're suddenly expecting them to be excited. They're going to go into the promised land where they're going to have to farm and grow crops and worry about the weather and worry about enemies that surround them and not have divine protection. That's quite a tall order. And what they say is very telling. The land devours its inhabitants. What does that mean? It doesn't mean it literally eats them up. It means they become consumed. So we don't want to go into a land that's going to consume us with worry, with day-to-day activities. We quite like our idyllic oasis in the desert. So what's the, as they say in Yiddish, the chap, what's the twist for Joshua and Caleb? I would suggest, it says in Pirkei Avot that you should make Hashem's will your will, right? What does that mean? It means, if we take COVID as an example, and it's very easy to judge, it's very hard to understand, but during COVID, I may have related this. When we were closed at one point, not because of legality, but because we couldn't get the numbers and it was legal to be open, I went to Bakaston one Shabbos, I went to Leytonstone one Shabbos. It was very nice to go to different shores, actually. I went to Leytonstone, a couple of chaps from Stamford Hill, all wearing masks and all social distancing, keeping the rules. But one guy says to me, people don't understand. We can't give up Minyan. For us, it's our lifeblood, right? Now, what, Minyan isn't my lifeblood as well? It's not about doing what I want. It's about doing what Hashem wants. And Hashem tells us that for Pikuach Nefesh, you don't daven with a Minyan. It's not a new thing. When there was cholera in Europe, they didn't go out to shore. So with the greatest respect to those people, I don't mean to judge. Are you following what you want, what you think Hashem wants, or what Hashem actually wants? The person who says they are going to fast on Yom Kippur because the Torah says you have to fast, even though they're putting themselves in danger, and their rabbi says, no, you mustn't fast. Their family say, no, you mustn't fast. The halakha says you mustn't fast. I don't care. I'm a pious Jew. I want to go above and beyond the letter of the law. I want to fast. Is that piety? No, it's stupidity. But it's where you put your will and your values, if you like, your priorities before God's. So maybe that's what's happening here. The other spies are saying, well, Hashem says we're going to enter the promised land. Moshe sent us to, check out the land, but we don't want to enter the promised land. We're quite happy with our life now. Yoshua and Caleb say, look, we have to enter the land. We have to enter the land. And that means that we will conquer them because we have a promise from God.
So why bother to send them? If God decided that they were going to get it in, because God knows what goes on before it happens, why send them in the first place? Why not just let them go and help them to cope when they get there?
It seems, and I'm not entirely familiar with all the commentaries, but it seems that it was a massive miscalculation by Moshe. God never told him to send spies. If we look,
right.
But we'll see. Well, no, sorry. Send for yourself. Shelach lecha. Send for yourself spies. So Rashi says, I'm not telling you to do it. I don't think we need it. But if you feel for yourself that you need to do this,
then
not because you Moshe,
then he should have done himself.
Okay, but that's what the leader doesn't do everything. They send people. I don't know what to tell you. When Prince William was a pilot and things, when Harry was deployed in Afghanistan, some people said it was highly irresponsible because you had someone that was obviously very high profile. It's going to cause more attention. I don't know if Moshe going would have been a good idea or not. So you send your spies, people who are no one's going to recognize. If you look at Rashi, it says Hashem says to Moshe, Shachacha, send for yourself. If you want to do it, it's on you. There's another thing Moshe did for himself, breaking the tablets. God never told him to do it. He didn't do many things himself. Well, he struck the rock, right? Generally speaking, God told him what to do. But Hashem says. So I think the traditional understanding is, and if anyone has heard differently, please tell me, because I'm not. This is not the final word. The calculation was they would come back and say, the land is flowing milk and honey, and it's wonderful, and it's, it looks fantastic, and it's, and all hunky-dory, and everyone would be really, big pat on the back for everyone. They would all feel good about it. I'm sure again, it comes down to perspective. It's like the joke that I told. I'm sure you know this story.
Did
I heard
Moses learn from that? Did Moses learn not to necessarily rely on his own desire?
Oh, Joshua did, because when he sent spies, which is the Haftarah for this week, he only sent two, as Caleb and Pinchas, and he knew they were his men that would get it right, basically. So, yes, in a nutshell. Spin is a very powerful thing, right? We've seen it with
Dominic Cummings.
So I'm back on. We've seen it with events in Israel. There's the classic story. I've heard two versions of it. One is one of the Hasidic Rebbe's, and one is with Rebbe Yisrael Salanta, who was from the Muslim movement. Basically, the way I heard it was that that I heard it with the Rebbe Shabbos, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, that one of his Hasidim came to him from Odessa. I think Odessa is in Ukraine, is it? Not even sure. Where's Odessa? Anyone know? Georgia, maybe?
Ukraine.
Ukraine.
Yes. Yeah, we've been
Well,
there.
unless the Russians have taken it over by now, right? So the guy comes and he says, Shalom Lechem Rebbe, I've come for a bracha. Rebbe says, oh, where are you from? He says, Odessa. He says, and what's it like in Odessa? He says, says there are people learning Torah all day. Some of the shops are shut for Shabbos. We have beautiful shuls and base medrashes and wonderful rabbis, and it's all good. It's all good. It's a place of great Torah and of mitzvahs. And his Rebbe says, thank you very much. He gives him like a nice, I don't know, whatever the equivalent would be of a, a £10 note for his trouble is here, for your trouble or whatever, for a bracha. The second guy comes, he says, where are you from? He says, also from Odessa. He says, no. And how are things in Odessa? He says, Rebbe, I got to tell you, it's very schwer, it's very difficult. He says, there are people smoking on Shabbos, and some of the youth that aren't learning, that are, getting into drugs, whatever it was in those days, there are people who keep their shops open on Shabbos. There are people who don't keep mitzvahs anymore. He says there's a bit of a a secular movement there. It's a bit of a reform movement there. He says it's very shlach. It's very schwer. It's very difficult. He says thank you very much. He gives him like half a p, or remember half penny coins.
Yep.
So he says, Rabbi, I don't understand. They said, your uncle's from Odessa. I'm from Odessa. I'm just telling you the truth. He says, you think I don't know what's going on in Odessa? Of course I know what's going on in Odessa. He says, I want to know, which Odessa do you come from? Which one do you live in? So you can have the same thing now. You can go to Israel today. I've often said this, so I've come back from Israel. You can go to Israel today and you can see a place of, brotherhood and sisterhood and, where the desert blooms and there's incredible Torah learning in every city and there's shuls and there's opportunities, mitzvahs, and there's Jewish unity and there's a realization of our dreams of 2,000 years. And it's just a beautiful place to go. Or you can go to Israel and you can see politics and problems and people who are secular and don't know any Torah and, the challenges of Russian immigration and whatever. And both are true. So which one do you see? So I think that's the message here as well. The spies came back and we're told, right, what was their punishment? They spoke Lashon Hara about the Holy Land. You shouldn't speak Lashon Hara about the Holy Land. You shouldn't badmouth the Holy Land. It's an interesting thing, by the way. From this, you could say that there's a difference between, so there's certain ways to be quote unquote anti-Israel, if you like. But somebody who is quote unquote anti-Israel, which might not be the same as being anti-Zionist, but perhaps from this Sedra should be very careful how they express their words. And some of the more well-known anti-Zionists, like the Satmar Rebbeim and so on, didn't use the kind of language that the Tzurikats used. There is a famous story that when the attack happened in Merkaz Harab, the shooting a number of years ago, the Satmar Rebbe instructed his Hasidim to say Tehillim, and somebody said, but Rebbe, you're anti-Zionist. He basically said something to the effect of, I don't support the political Zionism, but I support Jews. There's a big difference. You have to be clear. And we see from this week's Sedra that you should be very careful to not speak Lashon Hara about holy things, particularly the Holy Land. The spies came back and they trashed the Holy Land, basically. And they destroyed the people's morale, even if their motive was good. Listen, sometimes you have to, tough love, right? It's really hard to say no to a kid sometimes, It's really hard to take your kid to get a needle stuck in them, but sometimes you got to do it. So they may well have had noble motives, But nonetheless, but the line about the grasshoppers is such a powerful psychological insight into self-esteem, right? We've talked about this, I think, before, that, you know, Iris, don't you have a story about a chap that tried to mug you and you swatted him with your stick or something?
Oh, no, just my hand to his throat.
Right. So, you know, you see Iris walking down the street. She looks like, you know, she's a harmless, harmless older lady who's just walking down the street.
Not
you know.
then, I wasn't. I was a young woman then.
Oh, I see. I thought it was more recent. Okay.
No, it was
sorry.
many,
Right.
many years ago.
But actually, the point still stands that it's not about being 6'6" and built like a tank. You know, it's not even about necessarily carrying a weapon. It's about how you carry yourself. And when you do all this CST training and stuff, it's not actually about sort of knowing how to punch people and stuff, because at the end of the day, especially if they're armed or something, that's quite dangerous. It's about psychologically how you can walk down the street, hold your head high in such a way that you're not a target. You know, I'm sure, you know, that's what they tell women with self-defense stuff as well. You know, hold your head high, don't walk in shame with your head down. I'm sure everyone can think of a teacher they had in school who was diminutive in size but was extremely frightening. Possibly some of the people on this call even, I don't know. But so there's a certain kind of self-image, self-esteem, you know, self-respect, which has got nothing to do with your physical build or your physical capability. You know, and it's, you know, it's the same thing. You know, there's a bit of a conversation happening about domestic violence against men, and one of the problems is people never believe it because they assume that men are the aggressors. They don't understand that it's not actually about your physical strength necessarily. It's about your control and, you know, how you psych someone out, basically. You know, that's what the New Zealand rugby team know with their heku and whatever. So here we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers. We have no confidence in ourselves. For whatever reason, we saw ourselves as nobodies. Guess what? That's how we appear to them. Doesn't make any sense. Let's have a look at what they were saying in the Song at the Sea, which we say every day. Who'd like to read number 2? Any volunteers? Julian, you wanna?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, go for it.
The peoples have heard, they tremble. Pangs have seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Now are the
closest you'll find a reference to Palestine and Torah, by the way. Yeah.
Okay. Now are the chiefs of Edom dismayed. Trembling seizes the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. Is that it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the Hebrew. Sorry, yeah, that's from Oz Yashir. It's from the Oz Yashir that we say every day. So the people they've just sung this song where basically everyone's trembling in fear because they've all heard about. We know the whole purpose of the plagues was to put fear into the hearts of the Egyptians and the Jews. So why on earth would you think, you know, you've come this far and suddenly you're afraid? That doesn't make any sense. On the contrary, the people of the land are terrified of them. Let's have a look at the Haftarah. This is from Joshua 2. Who would like to read this? Sally, fancy reading? Can't hear you.
Shall I do it?
Sure, Julian.
I've got
I know that
sorry.
the Lord.
Hang on.
Go on, Julian.
Sorry, let me just give you context. Sorry, this is when Joshua, when Caleb and Pinchas are looking for a safe haven, and Rahab in Jericho basically gives them sanctuary. This is what she says. Right, yeah.
I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. So they weren't regarded as grasshoppers then.
No, right? But it's often the case, you know, you have this sometimes in modern life as well, that you'll have within the Jewish community people who feel they have to apologize for certain things when someone saying there's nothing to apologize for. Oh, we're so sorry that Israel exists. We're so sorry that we're a thorn in the side of the nations of the world. No, you don't have to apologize. So Rechav says, we've heard about you guys. I want to help you because basically we're terrified of you. We know that you have God on your side. And she was a very God-fearing person. I know she was also a prostitute. They say that she was an innkeeper, a madam of some kind. They say she later converted to Judaism, if I'm not mistaken. Did she marry Joshua? I don't remember. Something crazy like that. Anyway, so there's a dissonance here. You've got the spy saying, "Oh no, we can't do it," right? And who was it? Obama. Who was the "Yes, we can"? Obama, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Got it from Bob the Builder. Can we do it? Yes, we can. It's a very powerful motto. Can-do attitude, we call it, right? You know, say, "Oh, it'll never work." Well, if you say that, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right? The power of self-fulfilling prophecy is huge, particularly when you're one of the leaders, and in this case, leaders of tribes. Right? So it could even be that you're having a strategic discussion, and someone says, "You don't think this will ever work?" Say, "Well, can you have more of a can-do attitude?" That won't work. Come up with something that will work instead of just saying, "Oh no, there's no point. It's never going to work. We're doomed. We can't conquer them. That's it." You know, if you presumably look at wars through history, they weren't always won by the strongest side of numbers. They were won by the side that either had the strategy or the morale. Morale is a very powerful thing. So it was Joshua and Caleb that preserved the morale of the people ultimately. Unfortunately, they didn't listen to them, but they were rewarded. They were the only ones that lived through the generation. They end up still around. And ultimately, leaders have to build confidence. Right? If you have a can-do attitude, it rubs off on people. Right? Interestingly, little story for you, right? From when they fought Amalek. Who would like to read number 4?
I'll read. Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Moshe said to Joshua, "Pick some men for us and go out and do battle with Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. Then, whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, but whenever he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hand grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur, one on each side, supported his hands. Thus his hands remained steady until sunset.
Right. What's this about? This bizarre behavior of Moshe's hands. So Rabbi Sachs says it's a metaphor, basically. When Moshe holds his hands up high, when the people are looking upwards, they're victorious. When he puts them down, when they're looking downwards, then they fail. Right? It's like when you're climbing. You say, "How do you manage to climb so high?" The answer is you don't look down, you only look up. Right? I don't think you're supposed to look down when you're climbing. It's a bad idea. Then you realize how far up you are, etc. So Rabbi Sachs says that this is the metaphor of Moshe's hands. That as long as we look up, we win. When we start to look down or look backwards, that's when we fail. And interestingly, if you haven't already watched the program, I don't want to spoil it for you, but one of the things that came up, and I was slightly nervous that I may have caused offense in it, no one so far mentioned it, was we were asked about how central the Holocaust is and teaching and whatever. And I said, basically, I said to Stacey, I'm going to choose my words very carefully. I said, obviously, it's a very important event and it has to be properly dealt with respectfully. I said, but I don't think it's healthy when that becomes the base of one's Jewish identity, because it's a very negative. We should marry Jewish because otherwise we're giving Hitler a posthumous victory. That's a very negative Jewish identity. It's a very negative way of expressing one's Jewish identity. Oh, guys, you have to do mitzvahs and keep Judaism and keep it alive because we're always being persecuted and killed and lots of people died before you. So therefore you have to carry that flag. That's a very, it's a relevant point. It's a very negative identity. And quite honestly, even you shouldn't marry out because you're discontinuing the Jewish line. Okay, to a secular couple, that it might have some pull, but why are we not giving? I mean, again, I was asked in the program, and about partners for marriage. And I was asked, they said, do they have to be Jewish? I said, well, that's baseline. I said, and I didn't say because the Torah says, or I probably should have done. I said because you're building this life with your partner where you're keeping the Torah and the mitzvahs. How are you going to do that with somebody that doesn't buy into the same vision? And the truth is the same thing if one of you is more religious. It can be very difficult. So why are we not teaching our kids in school, marry Jewish? Because you want to share the values and build a Jewish life together. Not because otherwise you're giving Hitler because when you say that, somebody says, well, it's okay, because I'm a girl, so my kids will be halachically Jewish anyway, so who cares? There's much more to it than that. But we're all guilty of it. When people give birth to a girl, you think, oh, well, at least she'll have Jewish kids one day. Is that all it's about? Can we try to make it a more positive identity? So
another problem with that is that people don't discuss burial. What happens to them when they die in a mixed marriage?
Or they do, and that's why they end up not having a Jewish burial.
Well, I don't know. I had a discussion yesterday with in that situation. She wants to be cremated and he doesn't.
Which one's Jewish?
The him.
Right, okay. No, because I've had it the other way around as well. Yeah.
So it was just interesting.
I think that's a really good point, Sally, actually.
Yep. It is a place for discussion, but it's not easy to do with young people because they don't think that far ahead. Quite rightly.
Right.
100% with you.
Good luck.
So, I think
it's been a very difficult decision to try and make. Obviously me and my husband as well, we've had to have these conversations, but actually we had so many conversations about, getting married, if we were to have children, how we were going to bring them up. But we never had the conversation about burial, and he's got different ideas about, what's going to happen to him when that time comes to what I have.
Right.
So, we've only recently sorted out, and I've only recently become, a member and, putting my burial in, and we've decided what we're going to do now. So, yeah, definitely
and
something that
your children know.
Just to put that into perspective, right? Rabbi Selaznik, as in senior, is buried in Israel. Mrs. Selaznik is buried here. So I don't know all the, they were happily married. That's not an issue. It just they had different wishes. So even within, rabbinic families, you can have people go in different directions. It's an interesting one. I think Sally, the real answer to that is that the same reason that getting people to join a shul because after you're 40, your burial fees will go up is probably like some people ask you to life insurance. They don't see it as a priority right now, especially with all the other things they have going on. And that model is, but also that there is a certain negativity in that model as well. I'm sure I've told you the story before. There was a girl we knew that had didn't know her very well, but I came into contact with her. She was I think she was in Bushy actually. Anyway, it doesn't matter where she was from. She'd had a boy. Her husband wasn't Jewish. They weren't anything. I'm not saying why. I'm just giving you the context. They weren't anything to do with the community until then. Her father calls me up. He needs a mal. I put him in touch with someone. Ended up actually Purim coming to I think London. Rabbi Yossi Simon said it's the only Purim he never got drunk. He did the bris sober. They had a very nice experience. Very nice. I don't think I even met the girl actually, lady. But anyway, fine. Boy had a bris. A lot of people, by the way, will get in touch when they want a bris. They'll do nothing else, but that's important to them. Okay, it's great. Isn't it's something? A few months later, I bump into a guy in shul in Cardiff. He says, "Oh, I'm so and so's father. Rabbi, nice to meet you. Shalom." Chatting. He says, "I must get her to join the shul. Otherwise, what's she going to do when she dies?" And I'm thinking to myself, I think this is the problem. You didn't say get her to join the shul so that the kids can have a Jewish upbringing, or so that she can have spiritual fulfillment. You said join the shul as a burial scheme. You're busy worrying that she's going to get buried in a Jewish cemetery. What about her whole life? Or as Rabbi Sachs used to say, people always ask, what's it worth dying for? What's it worth living for? So I think there's an inherent, our focus on burial, in the United Synagogue particularly, emphasis on burial in terms of membership is counterproductive in some ways. Because Judaism, as long as you get buried in a Jewish cemetery, it doesn't matter what you do until then. It's not quite true. Of course. So anyway, yes, Moshe's hand's going up.
But you say that, hold on, you say that, but then before, so I was still going to my shul for, quite a long time without being a member, but I never got anything from them. I never got anything from the US or anything like that for my kids or for me. So it's also, how are you going to, you know, communicate with people who are not members?
No, 100%. No, so joining a shul should be something that you do, whatever that means. And for some, it might just mean getting on someone's mailing list because you want Jewish life. But I'm saying, if your sole reason for joining a shul is to be part of a burial scheme.
No, but I think what Lisa's saying is that as a person who was attending the community did not reach out to her either to encourage her to join or to become part of that community.
Right. So I am a strong advocate, and I think, Sally, I think generally, I think it is a very, anyway, we're meandering slightly off topic, but this is important. I've been in 3 different communities. I think that the attitude in Woodford Forest to non-members is a lot more A, healthy, and B, pragmatic than I found in my other communities, because I think I get the feeling that the attitude generally is that if someone starts coming to your shul or your activities or showing an interest and you embrace them and encourage them, they will ultimately join your shul. If you simply say things like, oh, this is members only, then you'll never get new members. So if you extend that to a complete long, and the other thing is that people generally take Lunch Club, for example. A lot of people come to Lunch Club and not are members. People are happy that people are using the building. Not all JLGB. People are happy that people are using the building. Not all shuls have that approach. Many shuls, many rabbis get, you'll say, oh, I had a family round for Friday night. Pretend, they've moved to the area. Are they members? No. Rabbi, why aren't you inviting our members round? As opposed to, oh, that's great that you're reaching out to people. So not all shuls have that attitude. I think the United Synagogue has gone through an organizational transformation that is much closer to being an outreach movement than it was in the past. You still have people from the old generation who say the United Synagogue is not an outreach movement. It's a synagogue body. You pay your membership like any other club.
I think it's an outreach movement first and a money-making thing later.
I think if any of us want to survive, the biggest challenge is to be an outreach movement. And that will ultimately bring people into the fold. Whatever sense of the word. That includes, by the way, reaching out to people who might be quite committed religiously, who aren't yet signed up and whatever. Anyway, that's just by the by. But sorry, Lisa. Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think, by the way, it's a whole rant, but if you ask any Chabad Shliach, the most fundamental thing they have is their mailing list. And their mailing list will often be a very diverse group of people, which by definition are not necessarily paid up members of. In America, for example, it's very common now someone that goes to Reform Temple, goes to Chabad Sunday School, where their kids get their education or something like that. The United Synagogue system, if, for example, if Lisa, you said to me now, I'm a member of Cranbrook, I'd like to get on the Woodford mailing list. It is such a pain to put you on there. We have to get your date of birth and your name, address, and 5 different phone numbers. And there's no simple way to just add you to our list so you get information. And I actually think that's a fundamental flaw with the system, because being able to add potentially interested people to your list, or people who attend your programs, right? Let's say you have someone that comes to your, so like for the Minyan, we have a WhatsApp group. It's really easy. Everyone who attends regularly is on there. I don't know if they're members or not, but the whole system is not the best. Unfortunately. Anyway, that's a different
completely agree with that. We definitely do need to open up to other people, otherwise you're never going to get more people wanting to come and more people wanting to practice the religion as well.
Do you know, I asked our shul, I said, when people sign up for CRP, which means they are going to come to shul to get their form signed for school, do we add them to our database for our mailing list? No, we don't. Why not? Somebody has expressed an interest in coming to our shul for an ulterior motive. They've chosen our shul over a different shul. Why are we not homing in on that, saying, great, we're going to add you to our mailing list. We'll give you our newsletter. Anyway, that's right. Let's go back to the share. So these are very important issues. But I think that the burial is a big thing. The burial is a big thing. And yes, it's important to have a Jewish burial, but if your focus is just on that, it's like if the only reason you want forget marrying in or out, if the only thing you want your kids to do Jewish stuff is because 6 million people died in the Holocaust, that's a very negative, kind of approach. So when Moshe has his hands up, when we look upwards with hope, with optimism, we thrive. When we look downwards with pessimism, we don't do so well. What's the next source? David Landers. Don't know who he was. Rabbi Sexters. Let's see what he's got to say. Right. So who wants to talk about optimists and pessimists?
Okay, I'll read it. in this world, the optimists have it, not because they are always right, but because they are always positive. Even when wrong, they are positive. And that is the way of achievement, correction, improvement, and success. Education, eyes open, optimism pays. Pessimist can only offer empty consolation of being right.
Yeah, nobody likes it.
David, yeah.
Nobody likes a pessimist. You've got it going on now. You know, you've got some of the government scientists, advisors saying, oh, we may have to hold back. They might be right, but nobody likes a pessimist. The problem is, if you've got the Prime Minister saying, we will open up no matter what, that also doesn't work. So Rabbi Sachs says, replace the word optimism with hope. Because he says optimism just means you believe things will get better. Hope means you believe you can actually make things better. And he says, if you look at Jewish history, it's very hard to be an optimist. Many of the prophets were quite pessimistic, like Jeremiah. But what you can do is you can have hope. So, what were the spies really afraid of? What were they really afraid of? So here's an interesting one. They were afraid of success. Right? Comes back to the whole grasshopper thing. You know, you have people that will, what is it? What's the phrase? Grasp defeat from the jaws of success. Is that the one?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you have people that will, everything's going really well and they'll just scupper it because they're afraid of success. You see it all the time. There's the famous joke I've told before about the three people in Helm who are having a race to see who can cross the river. First guy gets a quarter of the way across, flounders and swims back. Second guy gets halfway across, they have to rescue him out of the water. Third guy gets 3/4 of the way across, says it's too difficult, I can't do it, and goes all the way back to the beginning. There's a lot of people like that in the world. It's self-fulfilling. You know, they're afraid of victory. They're afraid of success. Why? Because right now everything's, as we said earlier, you know, they actually don't want to have victory. You know, it's like, you know, that famous joke about the two Israelis that are talking, and one says, you know, things are quite bad economically right now. What can we do? The other one says, I know what we'll do. We'll start a war with America. When we lose, they'll rebuild our country and give us billions of dollars. The other one says, okay, what happens if we win? Yeah. So it's quite daunting to go into a land and you're going to conquer the land, and suddenly you're going to have to harvest and create an economy and a welfare system and a government and all these things, when right now everything's just falling down from heaven for you. And yes, you're going to build the temple, but it's going to be a lot of work. So victory looks quite scary. Even the spies may well have believed they could conquer the land, but they're scared of the unknown. They're scared of victory. So what do they say? They say, we're better off where we are. Better the devil we know. Better the devil we know. The problem with that is that's not God's will. God's will isn't that we wander in the desert with everything on a plate. He wants us to go and work the land. And that's their failure. Their failure is that they may, you know, like if I try to protect someone from success in some way. You know, people sometimes do it with kids. You say, oh, don't be disappointed if you don't do well. Well, why don't you just encourage them? Let them do well. Fear of success. Because when you succeed, you know, it's like sometimes people don't want to go for a promotion. Why? Because fear of the responsibility, even though they might be very capable, or people don't want to take on certain roles because they're afraid of success. It's a very powerful emotion, not emotional, sense. Right? It's a trap we can all fall into very easily, fear of success. Listen, sometimes you're not going out for something. You know, sometimes the situation is dire. But that wasn't the case here. They've had all these miracles in the desert. Everything's going great for them. What is there to be afraid of? The only thing to be afraid of is basically the unknown. That once we get there, we won't know what to do. We'll fail. Why are you afraid of failure?
Because they've been a slave nation for their whole lives. They've only done what they've told. They haven't thought for themselves.
Sorry?
They were a slave nation. They've only known slavery and been told what to do. They've never ever been able to think for themselves.
I think that
That's why they were scared.
I haven't seen that discussed anywhere. I think that's a very good question. But they've been enslaved, and then they've got Moshe basically channeling everything from God on a plate. So when have they ever had to actually think for themselves? So it's an interesting one. But nonetheless, there is a message here. The message is one of optimism, as we said, and not pessimism. When you look up, you'll be victorious. When you look down, things go badly. When you anticipate a poor outcome, whatever the spies' motivation is a separate issue. Right? They weren't wicked people. Their intentions may have been that the people were better protected in the desert, or they didn't have to work in the desert. They had this idyllic existence, whatever it is. But the way they express it is very, very negative. It's very bad for morale.
Maybe they were also afraid that when the people went into Canaan, that they would be seduced by the people there into idolatry again.
Could be. Fear of assimilation, could be, absolutely.
Rabbi, but they had already done some battles and won.
Yeah, they certainly had. Right, didn't take much. The golden calf didn't take much. So these are definitely valid concerns. But the way they express it, and particularly the grasshopper line, is so debilitating. You know, to have your leaders say, "Oh, we were nothing. We're just a piece of dirt to be trampled on." Really, that's how you see yourself? You're going to lose whatever you do. You're going to fail. If you know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think you're going to fail, you probably will. Yeah, right. It's like, you know, Mystic Meg, and you know, you will have a terrible accident. Well, you spend the whole day wandering around, so paranoid you're going to trip over something. You probably actually will trip over something. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, what is the answer to this? Leaving aside their motivations we assume are probably noble, but it's a misunderstanding of God's will. God's will is not we should wander in the desert with everything on a plate. God's will is we should enter the land and farm and build the land and work the land and roll up our sleeves with our sweat and blood and tears, not blood, sweat and tears and whatever. Right. As Adam was told, by the sweat of your brow you shall live. However, in terms of the optimism, the pessimism, the psychology of it, interesting comment, as always, or lesson from Rabbi Sachs. Anyone know what the end of this week's Sedra is?
Third paragraph of the Shema.
Right. Let's read the third paragraph of the Shema. For anyone that hasn't read it yet today, or even if you have, who would like to read? It's quite short when you write it in English. Any volunteers who hasn't read yet?
Yeah, I'll read.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. The Lord said to Moses as follows: Speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout the ages. Let them attach a cord of blue to the fringe at each corner. That shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall it, all the commandments of the Lord, and observe them, so that you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge. Thus you shall be reminded to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I, the Lord, your God.
So it's interesting. It translates here as lustful urge. The actual word in Hebrew is ashetem zonim acharehem. Zonah in modern and ancient Hebrew is basically a lady of the night. So I don't know if it specifically means those kind of urges. There is, since we're all over 18, I believe, there is a famous story, I think, in the Gemara in Menachos about a certain, I don't remember who it was, but a certain gentleman who decided he wanted to have some fun. He found the most expensive, upper class, posh, whatever, fancy escort he could find, and he says he took a room in an inn and whatever. It describes in great detail all the luxury, and it says as he was taking off his clothes to do the act with her, his sitters hit him in the face. So they discuss whether it's literal or metaphorical. But either way, basically his sitters reminded him that this wasn't a good idea, and as a result of that, he, I guess, put his clothes back on and didn't go through with it. I think the Gemara says that this, I don't remember what her name was, but she was so impressed by his self-control that she later converted to Judaism. Seems to happen quite a lot with prostitutes, actually. But anyway, Rachav, I think, also did. But
what's the reminder for women?
Sorry?
This applies to men.
Yes. What's the reminder for women? Good question. I don't know. Hold that thought. I don't know. I mean, the tzitzis is a time-related mitzvah because you do it during the day. Hold that thought for a minute. So we already know that the tzitzis is supposed to basically remind us and keep us on the straight and narrow. So Rabbi Sachs adds something to that. Of course, nowadays they're white, but if you happen to be Sally's son-in-law, you might have some blue ones. Because Zach has some very nice blue threads. Does Michael have blue?
Hello?
No,
No. Okay.
I think
Sometimes who else?
Zach does.
Yeah.
Zach does. Zach has a Rambam one, which is a different kind of tying. It's really interesting. So the original threads were blue. So says Rabbi Sachs, blue is, what kind of blue was it? It was called sky blue. So he says, when you look at your tzitzis, it reminds you of the sky. Again, it's the idea of looking up, of optimism, that you will succeed and not fail. He says that's the key. So the last paragraph of the Shema actually gives us, again, a psychological insight that you have to believe you can succeed. When you are feeling that you might not, you look at your tzitzis. When you're failing or you're afraid of failure religiously, you look at your tzitzis. What do you see? First, it reminds you of God's commandments, the strings, whatever. But also, he says the blue reminds you to look up and look forward, not to look down, look backwards. I think it's a really powerful idea. And the problem with the spies is they're busy being pessimists and looking down, and it doesn't work. You have to be an optimist. You have to be a realist. You know, there's no point, you know, if I visit someone who's terminally ill, I say, yeah, you know, you go to 120. They say, right, get real, please. No, please. That's not helpful right now. It's not what I need right now. You know, but at the same time, we're eternal optimists. Regarding Sally's point, it's a good question. What do women have to remind them of mitzvot in the same way as men have to, if that's the purpose? Not sure. Good question.
You can see your husband's tzitzis.
No. Okay. What if you're not married? I think that's a very reasonable question. The reason women don't wear tzitzis is because it's a time-related mitzvah. There's no law against it. Sometimes I have occasionally come across it. It's an interesting phenomenon they've come across in some of the modern Orthodox schools in America. Some of the girls from conservative backgrounds want to put on tefillin. The school said, "Oh no, we don't do that here." They said, "Well, look, we do in our community," and it became a whole point of discussion. It's a good question. I think the presumption is always that the women are so naturally spiritual they don't need all this stuff. I'm being serious. Kippur is also a reminder that God is above us. We all say, "Well, ladies don't need that. They have more natural spirituality in them without needing, you know, physical stimuli." I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good question, actually.
Rabbi, can I ask a question, please?
Yes. I'm going to just, sorry, I'll just end the screen share and then we can all see each other.
No, don't take it away for a minute.
Sorry.
No, don't take it away. Oh, okay. The last paragraph.
Yeah.
I am the Lord your God who brought you out the land of Egypt to be your God. But he was our God before. I mean, with Isaac and Jacob and all of that.
Yeah, but so we sort of we say that we sort of, I know we talk about our patriarchs, Abraham the first Jew, but we, in terms of us as a nation now, we say that we were formed after the Exodus from Egypt, when God took us out of Egypt. And in the Ten Commandments also, he says, "I'm the Lord who brought you out of Egypt." It's a classic question, right? Well, I'm the Lord your God who created heavens and earth. What's Egypt got to do with it? So the answer is, it's like Hashem saying, "You owe me one. I did you a favor." You know, it's like when you say to someone, you know, "You owe me one." So if God would just say, "I created heavens and earth," okay, new. So what's new? I brought you out of Egypt. So I invested in you. Now I'm asking you to invest in me. So generally speaking, we say that as a more personal, you know, he says, "I've been on this journey with you. You know, I didn't just create heavens and earth," because that would apply to everyone. I brought you out of Egypt personally. So this is where we get off. This is our, you know, this is our relationship. And this is where we learn the obligation of remembering the Exodus. Why is remembering the Exodus so important? Who really cares that we left Egypt? Is it really so that we can be sympathetic to immigrants today? No, it's because that's where we formed as a nation. That's our miraculous, that's where we thank God for our freedom. That's the point of, you know, formation as a nation. That's why it's so important. Okay, I'll take that off. But that, yeah, just in isolation, the grasshopper line thing is one of the most incredible things. And you know, sometimes you hear about somebody who's, you know, extremely unwell, but puts on their makeup every day and gets dressed up and looks like a mensch, and you wouldn't know how much they're suffering because, you know, they have, whatever you want to call it, respect, I guess, you know, and dignity, and it's really important. You know, and that's often an important part of palliative care as well, as make a person maintains their dignity. You know, it's even if you feel that all hope is lost, it's still important to feel like a mensch, get dressed every day, you know, to have as dignified a life as you can, because that's really important. You know, and if you project that onto others, then they'll see you that way. Ultimately, it's the same with anything. You know, it's the same with disability. It's the same with a failing. You know, how you see yourself is how others. You can't expect others to believe in you if you don't believe in yourself, right? Simple as that. You know. Right. Anyone knows how to stop the light flickering all the time? I'm not even moving. It's just going on and off on my camera. It's really annoying. Oh, now I'm moving. Anyway, so I've put the link on the WhatsApp group for the JW3, which will let you watch the show for free.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Apparently it lasts until June the 2nd or 3rd or something. And there's 500 people signed up for JW3. Wow. Amazing.
Oh,
Is that because you're Stacey Dooley?
yeah, yeah. Yes. Sally, that's a good one.
We will be watching.
Yes,
We're watching.
definitely.
We're invited out especially to watch it because we don't.
We're
get
going
up.
out.
So,
First time for ages. We're going out at night.
So that's great. And if you watch the JW3, you'll also see the interview that I did with Stacey on Wednesday. I think it's going to be available online. It's quite interesting as well, talking about behind the scenes and things. Yeah. So even if you've got W on your TV, you can still sign up for the JW3 to watch the not the after party, but you know what I mean.
Wednesday night.
I think it's going to be on demand, so you'll get a link on Wednesday, I think.
Thank you. Have a good week, everybody.
Yes.
You too.
Everybody enjoy.
Thank you.
That'll be nice weather, so you can get so you can enjoy the weather as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lovely. We
Thank-
are.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thanks, Rabbi. Nice to see you all.
You
Bye.
too. Thank
How
you.
is the car?
Bye.
Yeah, I'll get back to you, Sally.
Okay.
Thank you.